Do you like scary movies? Said a voice on the phone. Sydney replied, "What's the point? They're all the same. Some stupid killer stalking some big-breasted girl who can't act, who is always running up the stairs when she should be running out the front door. It's insulting." Recognize this quote's movie? Stay tuned to find out, or check out the title of this episode of Talking Pictures Trivia.
Welcome to Talking Pictures Trivia, the podcast in which a group of geographically challenged friends explore movies through trivia as an excuse to keep their friendships alive. I'm one of these friends and today's host, Nick, and with me is...
Tom.
Additionally, joining us as guests for this week are...
My name is Chris.
And Ewane.
Thanks for joining us. You may remember Chris from prior episodes, including Spaceballs, Halloween, and House. Ewane and KJ work together, and Ewane is joining us for the first time. Chris and Ewane conveniently like movies. For those joining us for the first time, we start off each episode with a movie quiz, as these pivotal questions will determine who earns today's trivia crown. In round one, each question is worth 1 point, and in round two, each question is worth 2 points. Then, once the fierce competition is over, we followed up with our famous movie rant where anything goes. Tom, tell us about today's movie.
Today we are starting to prepare for the new Scream movie coming out this month by going back to 1996, where it all started. In 1996, USA's Major League Soccer started, NASA launched the Mars Global Surveyor, and mad cow disease was a concern. During all this, the Wes Craven movie Scream was released in theaters alongside Romeo plus Juliet, The English Patient, and Space Jam. Nick, what is Scream about?
I'm really excited to start off season 3 with a bang, or should I say a slash. Okay, I just lost all the audience. Gonna try to get you back real quick.
You'd say bang too. There's a lot of
That's true.
You should have said Stab. That was the name of the movie on Scream 2.
Oh.
That's why we invited Chris on this episode.
Yeah.
But now with all this horrible intro, what is it actually about? Apparently, there are murderers on the loose dressed up in scary, weird ghost mask costumes that are terrorizing this community. They have an affinity for using a knife as the weapon of choice. We're introduced to the lead, Sydney, who is terrorized, and her town is terrorized by these hooligans, if you will. And it's really an interesting way of how they go about choosing their victims and the way they terrorize them with a phone call and questions to follow. I really don't want to go too much into the plot here because I think the questions are going to do it. So we're going to jump right into it. Tom, if you only had one word to describe Scream, what would it be?
Intertextual. Chris?
I'm going to cheat. I'm going to say love letter.
Very good.
It's a love letter to horror movies.
I'm going to go with ruthless.
And my word would be stab. See why I couldn't use it before, Chris?
I knew you had it in you. I'm sorry. I just jumped the gun there.
It's time for question 1.
Who was the killer in Halloween?
Locked in.
Locked in.
Locked in.
Everyone tell me together.
Michael Myers.
Myers.
Good. Now to the real question.
Oh.
Name the killer in Friday the 13th.
Locked in.
Locked in.
Okay, is anyone not confident in their answer?
Pretty confident.
Okay, now you can all tell me again together.
Mrs. Voorhees.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone's going to get 1 point there. So I pretty much just ripped off a series from the first killing.
What door am I at?
Again, right from the movie, pretty much. I just wanted to bring that up because when I was watching this film, I completely forgot how gory it actually was. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the gore factor and the approach to how the killings actually happened or anything regarding that. I totally forgot that they were pretty much disemboweling people, having guts hanging out of them while they were hanging from trees or goalposts or other things.
me watching it so young, that's one of the things that stuck to me immediately the first time I saw it. Just people, Casey Becker hanging from the tree with her, everything hanging out. But in this rewatch, actually, in the 20 years since, with all the other gory movies that have come out, I actually didn't think it was that bad, to tell you the truth. It was slightly toned down to me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's very different from the what do you call it? Torture porn films that seem to come out a little bit later, right? We do have the precursor torture porn in God, what is it, Cannibal Holocaust and things like that, which were
Are you talking
70s
about like
films.
Saw, like that kind of stuff?
That type of thing that
Yeah.
comes later. This really seems to be much more like the films you loved as a child, Chris, which is, you know, the Friday the 13th, the Jasons, the Nightmare on Elm Streets, which aren't particularly overly gory. They just have a lot of blood. And I think, like, I agree with you, Wani, going back and seeing this, there is the disemboweled Casey and Steve, but it really isn't that gory. It feels, in terms of the violence, much closer to those 80s classics than the kind of the more intense stuff that comes later.
One of the interesting things about some of the early horror movies is that there was no blood in a lot of them. So take Halloween, for instance. The original Halloween had zero blood in it. There's zero red blood in it whatsoever. But then again, once that movie came out, that epitomized and basically birthed the genre of the slasher. And then from that point on, everybody had to one up each other. There had to be a reason to get butts in the seats at the theater. So it got progressively gorier as the 70s rolled into the 80s and beyond. I feel like this movie was almost like a throwback to that, where they weren't being overly gory for gory's sake. Like there wasn't like arterial spurts in some of the scenes, but they definitely wanted to show you that it was like real business, I guess. And I think they wanted that R rating because horror movies at R was kind of for a horror buff, that's a big thing. Because when you see a horror movie at PG-13, a lot of times people get turned off to it. It's not going to be like a real scary movie. So I think that was also something that they thought of at the time. And last thing, knowing that it's Wes Craven, kind of going back to, he was the originator of Freddy, going back to kind of like those kind of roots and trying to make this I don't want to call it psychological horror, but it kind of is a little bit like the idea of torturing the girls on the phone before they do it, especially in that first scene, and just kind of making it visceral in that way, I guess.
What a strong start to a movie, though. I mean, it really jumps right into what you're about to experience. Even at the end, where her parents come home and she can't talk, and they're coming in the door and she's reaching. I mean, it really impacted me even today. I recalled how much I thought that was crazy when I first saw it.
And it was arguably the most iconic actress in the movie. If you look at the poster, she's the front and center.
Oh yeah.
It was a known person. It was definitely it was choreographed that way. They wanted it to be shocking in the beginning, and they knew that everybody would know who Drew Barrymore was, and the fact that she bites it in the first like 15 minutes of the film was groundbreaking, I would say. I mean, I'm sure it's not the first movie to kill the lead that quickly, but I mean, it was certainly something that's memorable.
And it's been repeated in all of the Screams too. Even in the television show where they have the most famous actress killed in the first 10 or 15 minutes of the MTV
the first episode.
Yeah. What's it? I can't remember her name now, but she's
Bella. I think it was Bella Thorne.
Bella Thorne, thank you. Yeah, I know she's popular amongst the younger folk, but yeah.
It's time for question 2.
What director does Sidney Prescott's best friend Tatum Riley reference in this film?
Locked in.
Did KJ join us? Okay, Chris, you know that means you got to start us out.
Wow, I thought I knew this movie pretty well, and apparently I don't, because I can't remember. I'm gonna really kick myself in the butt when Tom and Ewane tell me the answer to this, because I don't know it. I'll say John Carpenter.
Ewane.
She references Wes Craven and John Carpenter.
What do you mean?
She calls the character. Well, can I say the character name that she said? She calls the director Wes Carpenter.
Okay, Tom.
I had the exact same thing. Yeah, it's on the porch. It goes, oh, it's like one of those Wes Carpenter. You're getting paranoid. It's like one of those Wes Carpenter movies.
Yes, the exact quote is, "Don't go there, Sid. You're starting to sound like some Wes Carpenter flick." But yes, it is also a reference to both Wes Craven and John Carpenter. By the way, for some reason, that porch was in, I know this has nothing to do with the movie. It's a giant tangent. That porch was really, really tall. I don't know if you guys noticed that. They look like ants under that porch.
You can't beat a good porch.
Hey, I like fine old architecture. What can I say? But the reason I brought this one up was I wanted to talk about how this film dealt with horror tropes, because it's definitely a strong theme throughout this film. We even talked about it a little bit prior in our initial thoughts, first impressions. What did you guys think about how it integrated these concepts, or really straight up referenced them in many ways?
Well, I would say, and this is partially inspired by this article by Valerie Wee, W-E-E, who wrote about this movie. But the kind of intertextual material is sort of the movie. The movie is itself illusion, like kind of pure illusion. I mean, there's that one scene where right before Nev Campbell's character Sydney and Billy Loomis go to bed together, and she says, "This is real life. It's not a movie." And he goes, "Of course it's a movie. It's all a movie." And that is the theme of this thing. It is composed of illusions, and not in a kind of wink wink sort of way. It isn't sending them up, right? It's not mocking them, but it is acknowledging the text qua text, right? It's sort of making the space of the movie itself the content, in this kind of postmodern way. Last season we all talked about modernism. We're now season 3 is going to be our postmodern season, and it's a good movie to ignite it, because that's
sheer coincidence.
What it is. Yeah. That's what it is, right? It is a movie about the intertextual dialogue that is going on.
There's a word that people use these days that I don't remember. It might have been around in the 90s, I'm not sure, but it's meta. And it's the idea of it kind of being like a meta movie. I feel like that's what this was. It was one of the first ones, at least I remember. It was maybe one of my first movie that kind of poked fun at movies. I know Spaceballs did it. You know, Spaceballs pretty much poking fun at the idea that it's a movie about another movie. But this one, at the same time, wasn't really a comedy, but was poking fun. It wasn't parodying anything. It wasn't like Tom says, it wasn't making fun of something, but it was still directly referencing something else, which I thought was interesting at the time, and I still enjoy it today. Like catching all those little Easter eggs and finding all the little inside jokes that they talk about.
Until Scary Movie came along, which was pretty much a remake of this film with maybe some other horror film references.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. Just saying it was a meta movie, like 90s. Yeah, because I mean, when Casey goes down, the first thing she does is like trip over nothing, which is like a trope right there. The white girl running in falls for no reason. So I think just as soon as you watch that, you kind of know what you're getting in for this movie.
And she also, in that scene, says in the phone call right before, "Oh, those movies are insulting. It's some big-breasted bimbo going up the stairs when she should be going out the door." And well, physical features aside, she ends up going up the stairs. She kind of copies that.
And to her credit, she tried the door first.
Okay, to her credit, yeah. So what's different about Scary Movie and Spaceballs in this picture is that Scary Movie and Spaceballs are sending up the material to make fun of it, as we said before. This really isn't trying to do that at all, obviously. And it's not, I don't think, even trying to do tongue-in-cheek, though it is populating the text of itself with so many illusions that I think the illusions themselves become the text. It becomes the film. It is this quilt of other horror movies. And then the response or the joy of it is that kind of metatextual experience that the audience has, right? They, as horror movie people, presumably, and if they're not, there's plenty of horror movie people who'll be watching it, are then sort of having a very different experience than they would be in the Spaceballs theater, where you're just kind of recognizing the tropes. Here, the tropes aren't isolated to mock. The tropes are themselves the content, so to speak, and they become they kind of make the movie a sort of glorious surface as opposed to an enjoyable depth, right? It becomes better surface. It becomes thicker and wider because of this kind of dialogical relationship with the other stuff, with the other material that the audience is kind of participating in and creating. And so it's a really weird experience when you have to subtract the kind of nudge nudge nod nod wink wink out of the filmmaking or film watching experience.
At the end of round one, Tom and Ewane are tied at 2 points, and Chris is still with us with 1. We'll be right back after a brief message from one of our valued sponsors.
Have an idea for an ad? Is it a fake product? We'll air it. Send us an audio clip of your fake ad, and after it goes through our rigorous and strict reviewing process, we'll fit it into an episode. Don't have an idea for an ad? Make one anyway and send it to fakeads@talkingpicturestrivia.com or call 201-467-8679 and leave a voicemail of your ad. You'd sound really good on radio. This ad requesting fake ads is a real ad requesting you to send us fake ads. Seriously, send us your fake ads.
And we're back. We are at the critical point of our episode where we ask the guests a key question. For season 3, we've switched it up a little bit, and I'm really excited about this one. This one goes out to both Chris and Ewane. If you could write your own sequel for Scream, what would be the plot? It does not have to be the plot of Scream 2 or any of those following sequels, but just your own based solely on this first film.
If your plot matches Scream 5, you automatically win the episode.
Well, I guess I have a goal then. So one of my favorite parts of Scream is when Sydney is leaving the police station. Gail Weathers comes around the corner with the cameraman, and she slugs her. And you know that there's a backstory there, that you get a little bit of the context a little bit later in the movie about, like a previous murder and writing a book and all this other stuff. But I always found that to be like a really cool interaction. And I thought it'd be kind of cool. Like, I know at the end of the first movie, they kind of get buddy and they're chummy because they got through this together. But what if Sydney put the mask on and was going after Gail? That would have been my Scream 2 perfect thing. Like, have the hunted become the hunter and go after a person that she dislikes because she besmirched her mother's name.
Nice. Ewane, now you're on the hot seat. What do you got?
Oh boy, it's tough to follow. I was thinking a movie that would come out years down the line, probably around now. If we go back to a couple years ago with Billy's dad and Sydney's mom, and explore that relationship more and end up with how Sydney's mom died.
So we're going prequel.
Yes.
Oh,
I'm thinking prequel.
That is interesting. Who knows? That could
I
be
just
Scream
lost
5
the
for all we
episode.
know. I didn't look at any of the trailers. Well, no, I like both of these angles though. And to be honest with you, when the studios run out of ideas, either one is possible. Let's be honest. There's any way to link these together. What I would say, I was thinking about this question myself, how I'd answer it. And in my mind, they already did a sequel. For some reason, even though I know what you did last summer has nothing to do with this franchise, it came out the following year. And these movies are tied together in my brain. For some reason, you just take another Party of Five female lead and you throw in another horror movie. And to me, they're somehow connected. So it's tough for me. We actually are going to cover that movie later in this block, which I think is going to be a lot of fun. But I don't know why I have those movies connected.
There's a relationship between them because
Really?
Jennifer Love Hewitt was either dating or married to the guy who plays Randy. What's his name?
Jamie Kennedy.
Jamie Kennedy.
Oh,
Yeah.
there is a connection.
there was a romance going on there. Which they were they married? Does anybody?
I think they might have just
I was
been
going to say
dating.
no, but okay, yeah. I was also going to say, does anybody care? Which is the better
Do
question.
you care who was dating in the mid-90s?
Yeah. And anybody care who was dating Jamie Kennedy? Do we need to know this?
There's actually another link between the two also. Apparently, the writer for Scream, he also wrote I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Now I know why I feel like they're connected.
Oh,
Now
that's
I know.
a better one.
Was he dating anyone from both movies? No.
Oh, Kevin Williamson.
Yeah.
So
And
that
he did,
makes sense why I feel
he
like
did
that,
Dawson?
when his name popped up on the credits,
He
that
did
was
Dawson's
exactly what my
Creek,
wife
right?
shouted at was Dawson's Creek.
the theme song went and started rolling in your head. Yeah.
Yeah.
I never even watched that show and I know the theme song.
This is really kind of interesting because it's just kind of like, because I think Sarah Michelle Gellar comes in later, right?
Yes, she's in Scream 2.
Scream 2, right? And so there's this like WB, because Sarah Michelle Gellar at this time is on Buffy, which is, obviously horror, horror teen stuff. And Kevin Williamson is writing Dawson's Creek, and then you have Party of Five with, I Know What You Did Last Summer. There's this like television film blob that's going on here that's actually really kind of cool.
Well, I think they always try to like aim movies at the teenagers, and I think that's what you're seeing. You're seeing like these are shows popular with teenagers. Let's get the writer that's popular with teenagers.
Exactly.
Let's get the teenagers involved. Let's just get teenagers to spend all their all their money to do it, and then they become 30 somethings like us, and then they start talking about this movie in a nostalgic reference.
And they can make a fifth one, but it's an interesting also kind of like, I'm going to go back to my word again, the kind of intertextual thing, because it's not just like what the movie is saying in the movie, but it's the people behind the scenes and kind of the marketing and all that is also like drawing this big network to capture people. That's really cool.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm really glad to hear Iwane's little tidbit there, because now I understand why they had the same feel.
They really do,
to me, that they were somehow connected. The guy wrote both of them.
Glad to help out there.
Thank you.
It's time for question 3.
Why couldn't Sydney initially be murdered?
Locked in.
Locked in.
Ooh, that's a close one. I'm going to let Ewane go first.
Because she was a virgin.
Chris.
Definitely virgin.
Tom.
I had the same thing, virgin.
Everyone is going to get the 2 points on that. Even though this one, I wasn't sure if people would get it or not. I thought this was kind of like really, like, I don't know, disturbing that he was pretty much toying with Sydney all this time in a relationship to check off this box so then she could become the murder target. So I wanted to bring this one up, this final girl thing we see in these type of movies. She is the final girl. So what do we think about the portrayal of that in this film?
I think it's interesting that she beats the trope. I mean, like, they're definitely saying that, oh yeah, and all these other slasher horror movies of the 70s and 80s, that if you had sex, you would die. And Jamie Kennedy sitting on the couch watching Halloween while she's talking about it, and why Jamie Lee Curtis makes it through all the movies. And then this movie definitely took it on its head and said that that's not true. Like that's not something that the final girl has to. There's no virtual the final girl here. That's not something that needs to be done. And they kind of rewrote that script. They rewrote that trope, that they kind of wrote it out, I guess, in a way that's not how it actually works. So I thought that was actually really good on their part to kind of like put that to bed as one of those tropes.
A little rewrite there. Yeah.
Yeah, it comes from Carol Clover. She's the scholar who coined the term "final girl." And what's also interesting about this is, yes, they put that to bed. They put that to bed in a pretty direct way, but there's also more than one final girl, because Gail Weathers survives and survives and survives and survives, and is also in the fifth movie. And so there ends up being.
But will she survive?
Yeah, well who knows? Yeah. I don't know if Courtney Cox has anything else going on right now, but that also seems to be another feature, is that you now have this kind of sorority survival type thing. These two women both survive, and they're kind of deliberately beating the trope down. And in beating the trope, also there's the irony of you're reestablishing it, right, or directing attention towards the trope when you discard it. Yeah.
So I think it was a way for them to kind of like set this picture aside, because it would have been really easy in the 90s to say, oh, this is just another slasher film. It's just another slasher film with teenagers who are going to get drunk and have sex and they're going to die and blah, 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 blah. This kind of like took it and said, listen, it is that, but at the same time, it's not. And it's a little different and we're doing things differently. We're taking ourselves seriously, even though we're referencing all that other material. So I thought that was a really smart move on their part to kind of like have a new jumping off point that was referential, but also it's a brand new kind of clean slate, especially in from this perspective of the final girl, as well as any of the other things that it kind of rewrote in horror, quote unquote, history.
Yeah, I think it's like just the metal stuff that we talked about earlier, how this movie kind of wants to almost update that trope to where you don't necessarily have to be so completely virtuous so you can still survive, you know?
I have some thoughts on this, but I want to know what you guys think. Do you think this was supposed to be a one-off or set a franchise?
Supposed to be a trilogy.
Yeah, he originally had Scream 1 written and like ideas for 2 and 3 from the jump.
That's interesting.
I don't think there was ever a doubt that he wanted to do more. He saw how popular Freddy was and how many movies came off of that. I'm sure he had outlines for the whole shebang.
Yeah, I didn't think they wanted to do 4, but I kind of, pushed into it.
5 in the plan in 2022?
Arguably, they shouldn't have done 4.
Yeah. Yeah, I have no idea. And David Arquette and Courtney Cox are divorced now, right? So that should be some fun
That was a long time ago.
on-screen chemistry. Yeah. I think they're both in the
Scream
film.
5, The Search for More Money.
Yeah.
But I don't think their characters are divorced. So it's all good.
That's what's important. Yeah. People we care about. Yeah. But I'm kind of curious because we keep talking about the difference between kind of send up and illusion, right? Or illusion is something other than mocking or parody, and that's something it's a really, really interesting dance that they're making in order to do something new, right? Because you need to do something new at this point with these types of films in order to get people kind of back in the seats, and that's something I was wondering what you guys thought, not to grab it, about of what the kind of illusions are actually doing to make a new audience.
Well, I will tell you that ghost scary face thing became iconic to today. I mean, that really carried forward. They built a brand just with the imagery. And what's really fascinating to me about it, when they're going around killing or trying to kill, they're not like well-oiled machines, like death traps we've seen before, or these crazy villains. They're kind of getting beat up a little bit. They're falling in wonky ways. They're taking shots to the gut and elsewhere. They're not invincible, but they still get the job done. So I thought that was an interesting portrayal of how this brand was building the baddies.
I think it was put another trope to bed, the invincible man or the invincible monster that you couldn't kill Freddy, you couldn't kill Jason, you couldn't kill Michael. Like, these were obviously buffoons. And they were like flipping over each other or getting kneed in the crotch or other things. Like, they were definitely like, oh, this is actually like a real person. This is not just some supervillain that you can't kill, that you can't get rid of, that you can't escape, kind of thing. So it's just another one of those tropes that they were trying to like destroy a little bit.
The one thing that they didn't really get rid of, though, is the disappearing act that the villain does. Like, there were a couple times towards the end of the movie when Sydney is stuck in Dewey's car and she's trying to call the cops. And I think Stu is the killer at that specific time. He gets into the car with her keys and, tries to stab her. She escapes, but then as soon as she turns around, he's nowhere to be found. Where could he have gone that quickly?
Yeah, I know what you're saying there. They still kept that. There's still that little bit of fantastical, I guess.
Yeah.
Like that they're
because it's not a realistic movie, right? It's not like they're putting the horror tropes to bed by having a realistic Billy Loomis kill people, right? Like imagine a psychologically damaged person who watches a lot of horror movies and decides to do this, right? That's not what we saw with this movie. We saw like the movies, the horror movies spawning this movie, not spawning a demented person who attempts to enact them in a way that's captured on screen in a realistic manner, right? It's still of the genre that it is made out of.
I do totally agree with what Ewane was saying about how like there were certain points where he could just kind of disappear out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But I do think that it was very interesting that they decided to make it two killers, where you could almost have like in those old movies where there was one single killer and they would pop up out of nowhere, they would immediately disappear, and then they'd be across town like 2 seconds later. Didn't make a lot of sense in those older ones. Or like, why is Jason on this side of the lake, but now he's in the campground or the cabin? Having the two different people made it possible for them to kind of pull the rug out from under us until the end. Well, it couldn't have been Billy because he was in Sydney's room, or it couldn't have been Stu because he was over here doing this. And they took a supernatural-esque moving character in the ghost face and gave it a real world explanation by saying that it wasn't just one person, it was two. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, it is a little strange how it just pops up. Like, how did he know? So I'm specifically referencing the scene where he's in the bathroom with Sydney. The girls are in there, they're talking. Sydney's in one of the stalls listening to them talk poorly about her mother. Sydney comes out of the bathroom, and then all of a sudden we now know that the ghost face has been in there the whole time. Like, was he literally standing in the bathroom the whole time when other random teenagers were going in? Like, how did he get in there? Like that was always a little sticky point for me too. But I did like the idea of having the two killers.
Yeah, that scene specifically, really, I can't think of an explanation for that one, because Sydney walks from her locker talking with Stu to the end of the hallway to talk to Billy. There's only one hallway to the bathroom. Billy doesn't follow her in. Stu could not have been in there at the time. That's the one thing that I don't have an answer for.
And I guess maybe they're trying to tell us that it's not one of them because we've already seen the two other kids running down the hallway in the mask.
That's what I was going to say. It could have been, but that's still like we're grasping at straws.
Yeah,
there.
It seems like it's one of them, right? The filmmaker seems to be telling you this is one of them.
But why are they in the bathroom anyhow? If it's not one of them, why are they there standing on the toilet waiting for Sydney? It's strange.
But why did they kill the principal?
Exactly. The Fonz did nothing. He's an innocent man.
The Fonz needed more screen time. That's what he needed. So
yeah,
he needed to do something.
We always need more Henry Winkler in our lives, but I think it's just because it's that movie. It's still that movie, right? It's still a slasher horror movie to, kind of shock the teenagers and what have you, or entertain the teenagers anyway. So you're still going to have the impossible coming out. You're still going to have body count, right? You need a body count, right? We can talk about, as Dewey does, like, well, he's not a serial killer. They haven't killed enough yet. We can hope, they kind of say that, which sort of reflects our attitudes. We want a high body count, right? We want these bodies to be stacked up. These aren't like fully developed people who we have empathy for, exactly, with the exception of Sydney. So it's still participating in the tropes, even as it is kind of flattening them and pushing them to the surface.
Not to belabor the Henry Winkler thing, but although he's a fantastic actor and we should talk about him a lot, I have to put this in there that as a person that's seen this movie 15 to 20 times, I know who the killers are from the jump. There's no need to think about that. But Henry Winkler was meant to be, for your first viewing, Henry Winkler is meant to be a suspect. The way he treats those two kids in the detention, like with pointing the scissors at them and like ripping the mask with the scissors, like I think they're trying to like make you feel as if he could potentially be like he has a motive for hating teenagers because of the way he like talks about it. You have no respect for this, that, or the other thing, or how people feel like. And then you have to bring it back around and kind of close that loop. It's like, oh no, it can't be that guy because he's now gone, or I didn't feel that this last time watching it because I've watched it so many times, but I remember that first viewing as I'm trying to like work the puzzle out in my head. Who could it be? Who could it be? He was meant to be one of those possible suspects early on, and killing him was a way of kind of closing that tie and saying, oh, nope, it's not him.
That makes sense. And the reason I didn't even view that this time was in the back of my head, even from the get-go, I'm like, I think there were two people working together. And I always had that, like, and I was like, even, from back in the day, I was like, so that, yeah, I wasn't thinking that because I knew there was like two characters at play. I was biased.
It's time for question 4.
Who supposedly killed Sydney's mother? And just to make it interesting, 1 point will be awarded for the character. 1 point will be awarded for the actor. If you get them both, you get both points.
Locked in.
Locked in.
Uh-oh. I guess this isn't too shocking to everybody.
I think people must have watched a lot of this movie because these questions seem pretty easy.
Okay. I don't even know the order there. I think, Tom, were you last?
Sure, I could go. Cotton Leaves Schreiber.
Okay. Ewane?
Cotton Weary, I think's his last name, and Liev Schreiber.
Chris?
Indeed, Cotton Weary and Liev Schreiber.
So I thought it was so odd that Liev Schreiber is just like in one scene, it's a non-speaking scene, and that's all we see of him in the whole movie. So it was just kind of funny to me. But the real reason for this one is, and again, we did talk about it a little bit in the last one, but I wanted to highlight the villains of this film. And we don't have to go back into anything we've already talked about, but really their portrayal, their motivations, and how they act. So anything new in that sphere?
So the killers?
Yes, Stu and is it Billy?
And Stu and Billy.
Billy Loomis, yeah. I mean the with Skeet Ulrich, is that his name? He's a little rough to watch. This he's got this he's clearly cast because there is a certain resemblance to Johnny Depp. And so there's a reference there to Nightmare on Elm Street, right? There
I didn't even think about that.
Similarity. I mean, I don't know that officially, but I think that's why he's in this film. But he's a very physically awkward guy. He's like a pretzel. He's always kind of curled.
He was hunched a lot. You're right.
He's hunched a lot, and he does the thing I find insufferable, where his face is down, but he's looking up. Like apparently people thought this was sexy, but I don't know how turned on you guys are when I do it, but
our audience is loving this, Tom.
Apparently that was considered sexy at one point. Matthew Illiard is a lot of fun in this, I think. His sort of kind of boyish over the topness. Like watching like him and Rose McGowan in terms of performances are like the people I ended up paying attention to the most, because Neve Campbell is she's fine. She's somewhat bland. It's also
bland is a good word for it, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also a somewhat bland character. She's not she is very different from the Jamie Lee Curtis character, but whatever. But I Jamie Lee Curtis character from Halloween, they are very different female leads, but I think the kind of watching Skeet Ulrich try and get through this is it's a little rough. Matthew Illard, and I also like the fact that Matthew Illard his character has no motive. He's just he just says it's peer pressure.
He did have a motive on the first one though, right? Wasn't Drew Barrymore's character his ex-girlfriend? She left him for
she was his ex-girlfriend, yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a connection there.
There was
but yes, it is funny when he says peer pressure.
It wasn't even the first person they killed right together, so
that was the peer pressure from Billy, breaking up the family when Sydney's mom was sleeping around with Billy's dad.
That motive makes Iwane's possible movie even that much more enticing, because I want to know, were Sydney and Billy dating while the affair was happening between Billy's father and Sydney's mother, or did that relationship start after Dad, or what was it? It was Billy's mom left, and then eventually becomes Billy's the killer in number 2. Yes. So Billy's mom leaves. Is that when Billy starts dating Sydney? Like, now he's going to hatch this master plan, or were they dating before? And like this was all happening at the same time while they were already dating, and he was going kind of mentally crazy, this entire year almost.
I believe they make reference to the fact that they were dating for 2 years, and after 1 year, she was less affectionate.
Because the mom died.
Yeah. But that's a long time to enact this plan of your next victim.
So that means that he was planning to kill Sydney's mom and frame another dude while he was still dating Sydney.
That's what it sounds like.
Yes.
Well, according to Scream 3, which if you've done your homework, you would know the plot of the Scream 3. They reveal that he decides to date Billy Loomis decides to date her after he sees a video of his dad with Sydney's mom. So apparently that happens before.
So that's how he decides to get closer to the family, by dating her?
Yeah, but in order to enact this thing. But you know what? That's Scream 3.
But you told me it was originally going to be a trilogy, so
yeah, canon. that was originally intended. Yeah, I guess it's canon. Yeah, which is this whole thing with Sydney's brother, who's a character you have to meet. Yeah, I don't know. And it's also, there's something interesting. We kind of talked about Ghostface as an icon, and how these killers are also very unimpressive people. Billy and what's his name? Randy? No, Randy's the movie nerd. Stu. Thank you, Stu. But what lasts is the outline of a threat, right? Which is always how these things work. Freddy's maybe an exception, but if you think of Michael Myers, what makes him interesting is he has the outline of a person. He isn't seemingly a person, and that's also true with Friday the 13th with Jason, who's sort of disappears into the mask. It's all about the mask, right? It's all about the presentation. And even with something like Candyman, where it's all kind of about the big jacket and the hook, and that this movie gets that right as well. Is that it's about the surface element, and that these people are really in a movie, right? They're in a movie. We're not peering into real life. We are seeing a movie unfold.
I'm going to jump into a bonus round here because we don't have a clear winner. Everyone can participate in bonus round, even though Tom and Ewane are tied at 6 points and Chris has 5. The bonus question is worth 3 points. So again, it is anyone's game here.
It's time for a bonus question.
Made some reference to this early on. Unfortunately, we didn't kill this question. What is the film's kill count?
Locked in.
Oh, locked in.
Closest without going over.
But I do have to say, locked in. However, does it have to happen within the runtime?
Yes.
Okay. Locked in.
Otherwise, it's not part of the usual kill counts.
And we're counting all the deaths in the movie. Is that right?
Human deaths.
Okay.
I had to bring up that because there was a movie where I think animals may have perished. So I'm not saying this is one of them, but yes.
I'm going to say 7.
7 was my number.
7.
Okay. It was 7.
Bonus question 2.
It was 7.
Ooh, can I name it in order for more points?
I can't. You know what? I can't give you for more points, but what I can do. No, I can't actually. If you want to do it, just shout it out. It would be fun to.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. There's Steve, Casey, Principal Hembry, Tatum, Kenny, then Stuart, then Billy.
And who's number 8? Who's the person who was killed? Oh,
well, I guess I can't ask that because you already know the answer. I know the answer. Do you want me to answer it?
Sure, go for it.
I was going to say Maureen Prescott.
Yep.
Yeah, but she was not killed during the actual film. Another bonus question. This one is worth 4 points.
Ooh.
It's time for a bonus question.
Who correctly identifies both killers?
Locked in.
Oh, locked in.
Locked in?
Ewane, you're starting us up.
Oh man, I have no clue on this one.
Throw something out there.
I'm going to guess Gail.
Okay. Okay. Chris?
I'm going to say Randy.
Tom?
I also had Randy in the movie store and then in front of the house. Yeah.
Tom is actually going to take down the episode, though. It is Randy Meeks, played by Jamie Kennedy. He correctly identifies Stu and Billy as the killers. He accuses Stu at the beginning when all the kids are at school talking about Casey and Steve's murder. And then he accuses Billy in the scene at the video store. So he correctly identified both killers. So congratulations to Tom.
Well done, Tom. Well done.
Thank you.
Good job, sir.
Thank you. Triple bonus. Yeah, we all know this movie pretty well.
I was going to say, you're pretty adept at Scream knowledge. I believe some of you had a few questions of your own that you wanted to throw out there.
What did you have there?
All right, so we know of the killer as Ghostface.
Mhm.
What character in the Scream franchise actually says the word Ghostface when describing the killer?
Locked in.
Oh, locked in. Locked in.
Could be wrong. I'm just going to say, I'm going to lock in. I'll go first. Sydney.
Tatum.
Yes, it was Rose McGowan.
Yeah, it was Rose McGowan. She was in the garage getting the beers.
Oh, the garage.
And she's at the
Yeah.
locked door, which come back to this locked door for a second. She's at the locked door. She turns around. She sees him and she calls him Ghostface. Now, once Tatum dies and the garage door closes, guess what happens? The garage door opens up again. So like the garage door was open the whole time for the Ghostface, but not for Rose McGowan because that would have ruined the plot.
Once I saw her go out in the garage, I had a vivid memory of what was coming next. I'm like, she's gonna have a bad day.
I have a feeling that engine isn't that strong.
Yeah, it's
I've never had a garage door opener, but I suspect they have somewhat less horsepower than would be required to sever a spine.
Yes, I always thought that scene was a little bit wonky too. Like the door wouldn't open for her, but it would open for the killer.
But doesn't he stop it? Isn't that?
Yeah, he did stop the
I thought
door. The door inside to the house wouldn't.
Yeah, I'm talking
but
about
the garage door.
I'm talking about the door to the house.
I'm
Okay.
sorry. Yeah. Mhm.
She goes up to it, it jiggles and it won't open. So she decides to try to go out through the garage door. And then that's when the ghost face kind of closes the door on her and you turn around, or she turns around and she sees him for the first time and blah, 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 get caught in the doggy door, etc. I do have one more, not to kind of ruin it.
Sure, go for it.
That's okay.
And this is a little bit, this is meta inside the meta. Sydney during the movie is talking about how they're going to make a made-for-TV movie of this whole situation.
Locked in.
Who does she say will play her in the movie?
Locked in. I get it. And she's right.
And she's right because it happens in the second
one.
Locked in.
I remember the reference of it. I remember this happening.
It ain't Meg Ryan.
I'll lock in. I'm just gonna say Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Tori Spelling.
Yeah, Tori Spelling.
Yeah, and funny enough,
yeah.
in the beginning of Scream
That was
2,
it.
they showed the movie Stab, and lo and behold, Tori Spelling is playing Nev Campbell's character.
You gotta love stuff like that, though. I mean, you gotta love.
There was an interview with Tori Spelling that she had no inside knowledge about Scream 1, about her name drop in Scream 1. But then when it did happen and Scream 2 was greenlit and they started casting for it, they called her up and she said, "Of course I want to be in this. This is fantastic."
Yeah, that's great.
Nice.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's time for Movie Rent.
Is this movie meta, or isn't it? And what do we mean by that? If it is,
I think it 100% is because it's self-referential. It itself is a horror movie and it references horror movies that have happened. So we can think of it as the horror movies that we know came out in the 80s and 70s came out in the quote unquote universe that this movie exists in. So like these characters are living in a universe where those movies occurred. And so we would have to assume that we are in that universe, even though we are watching a movie. So it's kind of like this Mobius strip twisting on itself, which is why I kind of think that it's meta. It's talking about other stuff that's in the real world. And I would say that it's not parody based on what you said, because it's not really making fun of those things. It's just referencing them.
It's almost like if Abed from the show Community were a horror movie. it would be Scream.
That is a fantastic reference, by the way.
On a related note to how we have to feel like it was in our universe, many people did, because I was reading that the use of caller ID like increased more than 3 times its usage after this film came out, because people wanted to know who was calling them. Kind of crazy when you think about it.
I like my wife actually picked up this when we watched it. She was like, they keep calling cell phones the cellular. Like, give me the cellular. I need the cellular. Like, because it was
why do you
brand new
have a
technology.
cellular? Yeah. Why do you have a
Why
cellular?
do you have a mobile phone, son?
So the sheriff, and this is another one of those like Henry Winkler moments. They actually try to hint to you that the sheriff is one of the people that could possibly do it when they show you his boots. Because usually you get that scene where he's outside talking to Dewey about how the ghost face mask can be found anywhere, and they specifically elevator pan down to his boots. And you saw those boots just 2 scenes ago when it's in the bathroom and it steps off of the toilet bowl.
Oh,
so it's just another one of those like red herrings that they tried to plant in there. It's like, oh, could it have been this person that had a little motive? And like, why is he getting away with it? Well, the sheriff could have gotten away with it. He could have cooked the evidence, if you will. So it's just another one of those like red herring moments.
Going back to the principal, before I was joking, why did he have to die? They noticed that there was like 30 pages of script where nobody died. So they were like, okay, principal's got to go, which kind of makes sense because it really didn't fit the loose thread of plot of why the murders, or I should say why the victims were selected. He was kind of random, whereas the other ones we could loosely tie to either Stu or Billy's motivations, of course taking into account peer pressure.
Now they close the school before the principal dies, correct?
Yeah,
so that couldn't have been a motive, like kill the principal, close the school, have the party, but that happened out of order. Like the school closed.
They were at the party when they find out about him dead.
That's right.
Because that's why
he was on the goalpost. Yes.
Yeah.
I was just trying to find motive when it doesn't exist.
That's the only one, but the other ones they have some like loose reference, and even then at the end where Billy's explaining, isn't it like pretty much crazy that there is no motive? And he's like, oh wait, I'll give you a motive. Your mother ruined my family. But it almost seemed like inserted not just for the audience, but even in the context of that universe. I'm holding this out until the end.
Yeah, I mean it when something like you're saying, Chris, about the Mobius strip that wraps in on itself. When I think it's, instead of wrapping in on itself, I see this as all surface, right? Like this difference between like something that we think of as modern and something like this, which comes along later, which is one is deep, one is a lot of surface. And one way you establish surface is you look towards the conventions and you just point a big finger at the conventions and hold them up and make them as fun and enjoyable as possible, not to mock, but just to make them as entertaining as you can. And I think that's, you kill the principal because we haven't killed somebody in 30 pages. Why is there a motive? We'll just stick one in here, but it clearly fails kind of stuck in. I still think the movie, like the motto of the movie is, of course it's a movie. We're in a movie. Is Billy Loomis, who's named after Donald Pleasance's character in Halloween, who's named after what's his name's character in Psycho, is telling us, hey, we're just in a movie. It's just a movie. I think it's just a way of creating an enjoyable surface.
There's one thing that we didn't bring up when it comes to being iconic about this film, and that's the voice modifiers on the phone. Yeah, that is something that definitely screams the movie Scream.
Oh, I've got one more outside thing to point out. So Kevin Williamson, he was inspired by Danny Rolling, the Gainesville Ripper. He was a spree killer in the early 90s.
Oh.
I like true crime, so I'm always into stuff.
Apparently,
like
a lot of people do now. It's very popular.
Gainesville Killer? I never heard of that.
Yeah, he killed people. What school's in Gainesville? It's not Florida State. What is that? I think University of Florida. Yeah. He killed like 4 or 5 people there over one weekend. So, yeah. And Kevin saw that in the news or whatever, and he got inspired to write Scream off of that. Do you guys know the original name that Scream was going to be?
Oh no, what was it?
I don't think it would have worked for this. I think it worked better as what the Wayans brothers did, Scary Movie.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
They do use that verbiage in the film. Like they reference the term scary movie a lot.
Yeah.
Was the Wayans brothers make Scary Movie?
Yep.
Yeah, they did the first two.
The first two, and then it kept happening.
Fell off the rails. Yeah.
What's his
They're
name?
they're iconic in their own way too, though, with the parodies of like the modern era too, because then they started doing all
They
the
did all-
blank movie.
Mhm.
It wasn't just scary movie.
Yeah.
Did the Wayans brothers do all of that product?
Just the first two, I think.
Just the first two
No,
scary movies.
They didn't
And
do
then
like
all-
the teenage
like epic movie.
Yeah.
No, they didn't do any of that.
I'd like to once again congratulate our winner of the week, which is Tom, who took it down in double bonus questions. Congratulations, Tom. But all of you really
Yay.
knew a lot about Scream. I did not know
Tom did.
the wealth of knowledge you had.
Tom didn't miss a
Mhm.
question today. He was on fire. He was the first one to lock in for every question, I think, and he just got every single one. There wasn't a single one he got wrong.
Flawless
I did.
victory.
Flawless victory.
Great week.
Starting the
Yeah.
season off strong, Tom.
Who
Yeah.
knew Tom
yeah.
liked superficial horror movies? I mean, really?
It was the post-modernity that really drew
It really was. So the theme of this season is going to be post-modernity. The secret theme of this season is driving Nick crazy by using the term post-modernity. So if everybody can get on board with that, I'd really appreciate it.
On another note, you can find more of our content wherever you listen to podcasts, on our YouTube channel, Twitter at Talking Studios, and our website, talkingpicturestrivia.com. We're extremely grateful to all those who subscribe, like, follow, and leave a review. Do you think Drew Barrymore deserves to be on the poster for this movie? Why or why not? Let us know on Twitter, talkingpicturestrivia@gmail.com, or give us a call at 201-467-8679. Thanks again, Chris and Ewane, for joining us today for this riveting conversation.
It's always a good time. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Had fun. Hope to do this again.
We hope you both will join us, even if Tom was victorious in his flawless win.
I just can't wait to come back for another postmodern episode.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes
They
last
all
season
will
we
be.
did a lot about modernity, so
Yeah.
now we've
Last-
moved to post.
Yeah, we've moved past the modern. So I'm sorry you missed it, guys.
Just listen to almost any episode picked by Tom or KJ
Mhm.
last
it was
season.
like KJ's. All of his were on like the topic of like the coming of modernity. It's like every movie he picked. I don't think he even noticed. It was just what he liked, yeah.
I know he didn't notice.
And you can find me on Twitter at Thomas Lehman15, and also check out our sister podcast, Talking Pictures Trivia B-Side.
I can also be found on Twitter at The Nicknamed. Join us next time when we continue to prepare for the new Scream movie and discuss Tom's recommendation from 1922, Nosferatu. Stay tuned for our first impressions of this film. Ding, 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 ding. Next week, we'll be discussing Nosferatu. Tom, how was your first watch?
I'm not entirely sure when my first watch was. It might actually have been this week. Part of the reason I say that is this movie is so popular that it sort of, you see it everywhere. It's become its own meme over and over again. You see it in commercials, on television, referenced in other things. I'm pretty confident I have seen it from beginning to end before, but I'm sure I've seen scenes from it or even images from it more frequently than I've seen the actual picture from beginning to end. I have read Dracula more than once, the source material, and I've also worked on a project about the legal cases surrounding the making of this film and Florence Stoker's lawsuit against Prana Films, which is the film company, or Prana Film, the film company that made this. And so I have actually a lot invested in this movie over the years, just from trying to like research 1920s German intellectual property law, which is actually a fascinating story, which not only involves Florence Stoker and these kind of German expressionists, but this kind of illegal smuggling of the film out of Germany, thanks to people like H.G. Wells and George Bernard Shaw. So I've spent a lot of time with this movie in many different ways.
So I guess I have a similar thing with Tom. Although I have seen the movie, I know I've seen the movie before. First saw the movie in 2011, and I remember I was watching. It actually was in like the winter of 2011 because I was living in London at the time. And I got this movie on I downloaded it on like Apple from the Apple store. So that was my first time actually ever watching this movie. And up to that point, I'd seen silent films before. I'd had to watch them for some classes, but I'd never really liked them. And I watched this movie, and that's sort of part of the reason why I kind of started watching more silent films was because of this movie. But so that was the first time I've actually seen this movie, and I've seen it a number of times since then. But I've read the book. First time I read the book was in 2007. So I've read the book, and then I've seen sort of references to this material and to the book for many years. I remember the first time I actually ever saw a reference to it was in there's an old computer game, Uninvited, and they make a reference to Nosferatu in that movie. So that was actually the first time I'd ever even heard of it. And then I remember I like Googled it, and I was kind of looking up like exactly what the movie was. And then so that's sort of my first overall experience with this movie.
I remember seeing clips of it, like in montages with other monsters like Dracula and Frankenstein. And I specifically remember this vampire because he looks quite different from the other 30s classic films. And I even remember asking my mom, like, oh, who is that one? And she either didn't know or tried to explain what a silent film was. But this was the second silent film I had seen. The first one I'd gotten Ben-Hur from the library on Blu-ray, the Charlton Heston one, and on the Blu-ray was also a silent film that was Ben-Hur. And I remember trying to watch that, and that was a tough watch, but I'm like, oh, maybe I'll try another one. So I tried Nosferatu. This was, I don't know, a few years ago. But this time I kind of just watched it on my laptop. I was surprised how many title cards and narration cards there were, but I'm sure we'll get into that in the episode. But yeah, just a straightforward watch.
This is similar to a lot of other people who already talked about this film, but I felt like I had already witnessed this movie, even though I hadn't, because they reference it in so many places. That specific portrayal of a Dracula creature is very unique, like KJ was just saying. And I don't know why I don't know why it took me so long to finally watch this film. And I enjoyed it. And specifically that scene you always see where he like rises from the ground. It's really cool. That's the part I just remember seeing that clip over and over in various different sources. And now I can actually see it in context.